Hi, my name is Oluwole Godwin and welcome to Emoji Economics. Today we shall be talking about theory of cost. Okay, so what is cost? Cost is simply what we give up to have something. Okay, so when we buy, let me say, a marker of, let me say, 100 naira. Okay, so in order to have this marker, I've given up 100 naira. Okay, so 100 naira happens to be the cost of this marker. Okay, so costs are not as simple as that all the time though, but let's just leave it that way for now. Okay, then when it comes to production, okay, so what does cost mean to a producer? Okay, so a cost is simply the market value of all the inputs that are used up in the production process. Okay, so that is what a cost means to a, that's what a cost means, okay, to a producer. All right, so quickly, we have different types of cost. We have the fixed costs, we have the variable cost, and then we have the total cost. Okay, so we have average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, and as well we have the marginal costs. Okay, so we're talking about this cost in a bit, and then subsequent times we'll be talking about the interrelationship that exists among some of these costs. Okay, so let's start with fixed cost. So what is a fixed cost? A fixed cost is a cost that does not change with output level. Okay, so simply, whether you're producing something or you're producing 10 units of a thing, or a producer is producing 100 units of a thing, okay, the fixed cost remains the same. It remains the same. Okay, and then there's one important thing to note about fixed cost. It is simply that even when a producer is producing nothing, it still incurs a fixed cost. All right, so let me give an hypothetical example. Let's say we have a fashion designer who wants a sewing machine. Okay, the person wants to start fashion designing activities. Okay, the person has already bought, our fashion designer has already bought the sewing machine. Okay, so that represents a fixed cost. Now, it doesn't matter whether our fashion designer is not sewing anything yet. Okay, so if the cost of the sewing machine is 100,000 naira, okay, the cost has already been incurred. Okay, if our fashion designer decides to sew like 20 clothes, okay, like our fashion designer is producing 20 clothes with the sewing machine, the fixed cost still doesn't change. Okay, the cost of the machine still remains 100,000 naira. Okay, so if our fashion designer decides to produce only one, okay, only one piece of clothes, okay, or let me say 1,000 pieces of clothing with that machine, okay, the fixed cost still remains 100,000 naira. Okay, so that's an example of a fixed cost. It doesn't change with it doesn't change with the output level. It doesn't change at all. Okay, so graphically, our fixed cost is expressed like this. Okay, so we can see that even when the output was zero, the fixed cost was 100,000 naira. When output became this quantity, first quantity, okay, so it is still 100,000 naira. This quantity still 100,000 naira. This quantity still 100,000 naira. Okay, so that is a fixed cost. Now, mathematically, a fixed cost is calculated as the total cost minus the variable cost. So we talk about total cost and variable cost in a bit. All right, so that's about fixed cost. So let's talk about the variable cost. The variable cost is variable costs are expenses or costs that change with the level of output produced. Okay, so if a producer is not producing anything, okay, the producer does not incur any variable cost. All right, because the variable cost changes with the amount of output that is produced. Now let us return to our fashion designer's example. Okay, so our fashion designer is now ready to sew clothes. Okay, so he or she will be needing something like needle and thread. All right, so we don't expect our fashion designer to go buy 1,000 cartons of thread and needles and whatever like that. Okay, if our producer is not considering the amount of clothes that he or she is going to be sewing. All right, so because the amount of needles and threads available is going to at the disposal of our producer, our fashion designer, is going to be as a result of the amount of clothes that our fashion designer is going to produce. All right, so the cost of needle and the cost of thread in that case is called variable cost. So they are part of variable cost. Okay, so it is still the same machine. Okay, the same sewing machine, but then if our producer wants to produce let me say 10 clothes, okay, he or she might be needing up to like 3 needles in case one breaks and stuff like that. Okay, and if our producer wants to produce 100 clothes, we expect our producer to have more than 3 needles, more than Okay, even if need is not a very good example, okay, in this maybe you don't really understand what I'm saying, but then let us talk about the thread. Okay, so the thread that our producer is going to use to produce one clothes is not the same as what our producer is going to use to produce 20 clothes. And if our producer is not producing any clothes at all, he or she doesn't need the thread. Okay, so that is an example of variable cost. Okay, so the more the clothes that are produced, okay, the more the thread that will be used by our producer. All right, so the cost of that thread is a variable cost. Okay, so now we should really understand that a variable cost starts from zero. Okay, our fixed cost does not start from zero. A variable cost starts from zero. That is, when the quantity produced is zero, our variable cost is as well zero. All right, so it increases as our output, or as the output of a producer is increasing. So we'll show that on the graph briefly. So here we go. This is a curve. This is a variable cost curve. Okay, so it starts from origin 0. All right, so we've written definition. A variable cost is a cost that changes with output level. It is 0 when q equals 0, and then mathematically variable cost equals the total cost minus the fixed cost. Okay, so as we can see, the variable cost is generally an upward sloping curve. Okay, so it's upward sloping. Then it has an inflection point. So an inflection point is where a curve changes slope. Okay, so this is more gentle. Okay, this slope is more gentle than what we have here. So this is now a steep slope. Okay, but generally it is the variable cost increases, the curve increases, okay, over time. Next we move into the total cost. So what is the total cost? Total cost is simply the total expenses, okay, incurred in producing goods and services. Okay, so it is the sum of the fixed cost and the variable cost. Okay, so this our total cost. Total cost is the sum of all the costs or expenses incurred in the production process. It is the sum of fixed cost and variable cost. So mathematically it is expressed as TC equals FC plus VC. Alright, now this is the total cost curve. Alright, you can see that it is also upward sloping with an inflection point. Now the inflection point arises here because of the inflection point in the variable cost. Okay, remember that total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. Alright, then another thing to note is that total cost is not starting from zero. Okay, it's not starting from zero because at the quantity of 0, our total cost at q equals 0, okay, total cost equals to fixed cost. Alright, so total cost cannot be 0, okay, simply because fixed cost is not 0. Fixed cost cannot be 0, and because of that, total cost cannot be 0 as well. So total cost is fixed as the worst thing that can happen is when total cost is equal to fixed cost. So variable cost can be 0 based on what we explained earlier. Alright, so this curve is a combination of two things. Once again, it is not starting from the origin simply because there is a fixed cost. Alright, then it is of this shape, upward sloping with an inflection point and so on and so forth, because of the shape of the variable cost as well. Alright, so now let us show the relationship that exists between the total cost and the variable cost and the fixed cost. So we'll get to that in a minute. Here we have the relationship between the total cost, the variable cost, and the fixed cost. Alright, so the fixed cost is this, okay, our horizontal line, okay, it's parallel horizontal, and then these are total cost, then these are variable cost. Okay, so the difference between these points, as Q1, the difference between this point and then this point represents the fixed cost. Alright, so all of A represents the fixed cost as Q1 because this point represents the total cost here. So let's say TC1 then minus the variable cost here. Okay, so TC1 minus VC1 will give us the fixed cost, okay, which is just the straight line, okay, size of this the straight line. Okay, so look at Q2. So at Q2 we have this variable cost. So this variable cost, so which is VC2, and then we trace that up, okay, to have this, which happens to be the TC2, okay, the second total cost. So this second total cost minus the second variable cost is going to give us this region, okay, the fixed cost for that region. Okay, so on and on and on and on like that. So the curves are not expected to be drawn anyhow. Okay, so this is the way the curves are expected to be drawn. Fixed cost this way, it's not starting from 0. total cost starting from where fixed cost is starting from, because it can't be 0, then you have variable cost starting from 0. All right, and then with these shapes. All right, so now let us move into the average cost. Okay, we have three average costs. So the average fixed cost, the average variable cost, and the average total cost, and they all have their uniqueness and a defined relationship. Okay, we also have the marginal cost. So let's get there now. Average fixed cost is the fixed cost per unit of outputs produced. Okay, so it's simply it's simply fixed costs divided by quantity. All right, quantity. All right, so this is the curve here. The curve is downward sloping. All right, then the shape of this curve is called a rectangular hyperbola. Okay, the shape is called a rectangular hyperbola, and it decreases but never equals 0. All right, so as more and more output is produced, the average fixed cost reduces, but it never equals 0. Okay, so how does that happen? Remember that the fixed cost is just a value. Okay, it's fixed, which is in our example, okay, we call it let's call it 5,000 naira here, 5,000 naira. So let's assume that our producer is producing just 1 unit of cloth. Okay, that's 5,000. Okay, so be having AFC there will be 5,000 divided by 1, which is 5,000. Then let us assume that our producer now is producing 1,000 pieces of clothes. So we have 5,000 divided by the quantity now, 1,000. Okay, and this is just 5. What if our producer starts producing, we can say it is falling, so 5,000 to 5. What if our producer starts producing AFC3 100,000 clothes? Okay, so we have 5,000, let me say 5,000, let me say 500,000 clothes divided by 500,000 clothes. All right, so what do we have here? We're having a 1/100, which is 0.01. Okay, so on and on like that. So we keep having 0.01, 0.001, 0.00001. Okay, but never equal to 0. So it's downward sloping, then never equal to 0. So as more and more output is being produced, the average fixed cost reduces. Okay, it reduces so small. Okay, at some output produced, but then we don't have it equal to 0. Okay, so that is that about the average fixed cost. So now let's talk about the average variable cost. Okay, so the average variable cost is known as variable cost per unit of output produced. Okay, so average variable cost is simply variable cost divided by Q. Okay, here we go. Average variable cost is the variable cost per unit of output produced. Alright, so mathematically it is expressed as variable cost divided by Q. So this is what we have for the average variable cost. Alright, Q on the axis, cost here. Then it is U-shaped. The average variable cost is U-shaped. Okay, so it depends on whether the producer is in the short run or in the long run. Alright, so here we don't know, it might be average variable cost might be falling here due to returns to scale. Okay, or maybe good stuffs. Okay, so economies of scale, returns to scale, and so on and so forth. Okay, then this place this is at the upward region of the average variable cost, and which might be caused by decreasing returns to scale. Okay, and so on and so forth. All right, so it's either this decreasing returns to scale or maybe diminishing returns. Okay, it might be because of the law of diminishing returns. So it depends on whether the producer is in the short run or the long run. All right, so but all in all, our average variable cost is U-shaped. Okay, so this is to say that as quantity produced increases at first, we have the average variable cost falling. All right, but then it gets to a particular point where an increase, okay, in the quantity produced is going to lead to an increase in the average variable cost. So at that point, the average variable cost curve begins to slope upwards. Okay, so at the first part it slopes downwards, then it gets to a minimum point. Okay, this is minimum point, and then begins to slope upward. All right, so the average once again is calculated as variable cost divided by quantity produced. Okay, so the last averages that I want to talk about here is going to be the average total cost. Okay, average total cost is the total cost per unit of output produced. Okay, so which is total cost of our quantity, and then we have this, it is as well U-shaped. Okay, so what is making this place to fall depends on whether the producer is in the short run or in the long run. Okay, so which might be returns to scale, and so on and so forth. Then what is making this place to go up, okay, also depends on the same factor, okay, whether it is decreasing returns to scale and or law of variable proportions. Okay, so this part is simply telling us that as long as the producer is producing before this minimum point, the average cost is falling. Okay, that's the average cost per unit of output produced is falling. Then after this minimum point, immediately the producer starts producing beyond Q2, average cost begins to rise. Okay, average cost begins to rise. Okay, so this is what we have, U-shaped curve for the ATC. All right. Then the next thing that we have to do now is to show the relationship between the three averages. Okay, the average total cost, the average variable cost, and the average fixed cost. Okay, we have a graph of the average total cost of three averages. So this is the cost. All right. Average total cost is the first. It's on top because it is a summation of average fixed cost plus average variable cost. Okay, that's another formula for it. What we need to note again is that it is above AVC. Okay, then we have our AFC, which is downward sloping continuously. And then another thing to note is that ATC, this curve minus this curve, must always give us our average fixed cost. All right, must always give us our average fixed cost. And we note that the difference between the gap between these two curves, okay, is reducing, all right, until this point. That is because it measures the average fixed cost, and the average fixed cost is actually reducing. Okay, it's actually reducing, but then these two curves never get to intersect. That is, the difference between ATC and AVC never becomes zero, since our AFC cannot be zero. All right, so AFC that is here is also the same thing that is measured between the gap here and here, between the gap of this curve here and here, these two curves here and this place and this place. All right, so that gap will continue to become smaller and smaller, but AVC and ATC never gets to intersect, never gets to touch each other. Okay, so there is this last cost that we need to introduce, which is the marginal cost. Okay, so the marginal cost is telling us the additional cost incurred if a producer is willing to produce one more unit of a commodity. Okay, so the additional cost incurred if a producer is willing to produce one more unit of a commodity. So if we are to draw the marginal cost intersects AVC and ATC at their minimum point. At their minimum point. Okay, so we have the marginal curve is this way. Okay, so this is the marginal cost. All right, so the marginal cost intersects the ATC and the AFC at their minimum point. Okay, in our next video we'll be talking about mathematical calculations of all of these. Okay, please watch out for that, and if you have any questions concerning this video, remember to leave your questions in the comment section, like this video, and please subscribe to this channel for more updates. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.